Okay, so we got peak seal. So we're in 18.7. Peak seal mechitalo usfasav mokesh nafsho. Do you want to take a stab at an initial translation there?
Sure. Okay. So the mouth of the fool, mechita, I don't know what that is. Mechitalo is something to him, and his lips are something his soul.
Okay, yeah. All right, so mokesh I will translate because there is only one way to translate that, a snare. For his now, so here we already have an ambiguity. So soul is going to be the literal translation, but as we see in is it, I guess, in this week's parsha? I'm just trying to think if it uses it there. Yeah. Do you have any other possibilities for nefesh or nafsho?
I guess like body.
Yeah, right. So sometimes, so soul, body. Okay, good. Um, Sometimes means life, right? Like nefesh kol basar badamhu, right? Or was that the phrase? The nefesh of every living thing is in its blood. So there means life.
Right.
And then
Yeah.
sometimes I don't know if what I'm about to say is the same as body, uh, but it could also mean self. Okay, because like same way that atmo literally means his bone, but we use it to mean himself. Then same thing with nafsho. Then sometimes it means soul, sometimes it means self.
Right. Okay.
Then mechita. So mechita is going to have several possibilities for translation. I would have translated it as destruction. Okay. But there is another possibility, which is it comes from trying to think what the I don't even know what the shorish is, but like chitas means fear. Okay. Like I'm gonna try. There's a pasuk in Devarim that has it. Hold on. Where it's talking about, I think it's in Akev. Hold on. I should have looked this up ahead of time. When he says, I think it's in Akev. When he says that about the animals taking over. Let me see here.
I don't know.
I'm just flipping through. Wait, maybe this is it. One of the Mefarshim quoted it, so we'll see when we look at the Mefarshim. Okay, so let me actually start off by just doing what we usually do with the art scroll, living knock, and altar, just to get some other possibilities here. So art scroll says for 7. Okay, so it says art scroll says the mouth of the fool brings destruction to him. Wait, is this to himself? Okay, and his lips are this is weird, stumbling block for, where is it? Stumbling block to his soul. Hey, Joe.
Kind of that translation kind of reminds me of like how Onkelos like sort of like gets rid of like the metaphor, like kind of makes it more literal. So it seems like what art scroll's doing.
You're talking about for the snare part?
Yeah, like snare is kind of like slightly metaphorical, I guess. Like
right,
meanings. It's not a literal snare. So
right, yeah, that's a good point. That is true. Okay, so then I'm just trying to look at living nach. Okay, so living nach has the mouth of a fool is his ruin, and his lips a trap for his soul. I'm assuming here trap is the same as a snare. They're just using a different word here. And then for altar, we have a fool's, where are we here? A fool's mouth is a disaster for him. Interesting. And his lips a snare for his life. Okay, so he does go with life. Yeah. All right, and then I checked beforehand. I'll just show you anyway. I checked the Targum, which just remember now that we're in Onkelos mode, that this Targum is not Targum Onkelos. There's no Onkelos on Nach.
Right.
Yeah. So Pume de Sichla Shatzia Hule. The mouth of a fool is a. I looked up Shatzia is just the translation of Mechita. So however you translate Mechita, then then that's actually I think it's mechita is as in destruction. Hulei, it is to him v'sif vase, and his lips pacha inun lenafshe. They are a trap for his soul. So it's just a literal translation there. Okay, so what are the questions and problems here? We shall list them. Remember that even obvious questions and problems are fair game, because if we don't list the obvious ones, then we might miss something.
Right. I guess like why what does it mean? I guess what does it mean that his mouth leads to destruction? Like what about his mouth and his lips?
Okay.
Like is it his words that we're talking about? Is it
okay, good. All right, so let's break that down to its component questions here. So how does his mouth bring destruction to him? And then how are his lips a snare to him? And then and then I guess I'll put this as a third question where we can kind of just encompass a bunch of things. Why mouth and lips? Right, is assuming it means speech, what is the implication? What are the implications of these two terms? What are the implications of these two terms? Why not just say speech? I think this is all just different angles of asking the same question. Yeah. And again, this is the type of question where you'll see the Mefarshim take two approaches. Either it's davka p versus svasav, or those are just synonyms. But either way, it's a fair question. Just might not be the answer might not be distinguishing between the two. Okay, then we have our question, which we now have new insight into based on our last Mishlei shiur before the break, is what is a ksil? Right. This is hopefully something that will constantly be evolving. Now I'm gonna ask a question that's a no-no. Okay, it's not a no-no absolutely, but it's actually we were really planning to do this pasuk the day before break, and I'm actually in some ways I'm glad there's been a more than a week separation between the two Mishlei classes, because if you remember the last pasuk, let me just go back to the last pasuk. Last pasuk was very similar to this one, okay, which is vav here. Sifse ksil yavou bariv ufiv lemahalumos yikra. The lips of a fool come in quarrel or in contention, and his mouth calls out for blows, or for physical blows. So that's something that that is that if we had done that pasuk like right before this, we'd have to ask the question, what's the difference between this and that, which is still a legitimate question, but like, it's not, like sometimes you find a pasuk that sounds like it's almost saying exactly the same thing as the previous one. And this is one of those cases. So just wanted to point that out there. I'm going to list this question because it would be nice to clarify. So what is the relationship between this pasuk and the previous one? Yay, video.
Hey.
Okay. All right. What else?
Right.
I mean, I think we got the main questions.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So now let's work on it. Yeah, and I guess none of these translations went with fear, but that is another possibility here.
Right.
Okay. So what do you say?
Yeah. Well, it's very. I mean, right. Like, what exactly is the situation that it's talking about? Like, if you didn't know anything about the ksil, it would kind of be very difficult to get anything out of this, right?
Right. Well, you could still see what he's doing, and then infer certain things about him from here. But yeah, it'd be difficult to get any specific ideas. Yeah, let's take that to its let's explore that. So what could we get out of this? Because I think your question is coming from the intuition that like we don't want to immediately plug in what we know about the seal. So let's see what we could get without plugging in, and then if we have to, then we will.
Right.
So I guess the biggest thing we have to work with here is destruction and snare, right? Those are two different consequences. And the other, here's another question that we didn't get actually, okay, which is, what is the difference between lo and lenafsho? That's an important one, right? Because lo seems to be the most general thing possible. See, I would have assumed that I would have taken nafsho in a very general way. But the fact that it says lo and then nafsho to me indicates that lenafsho is more specific. So in other words, I would actually eliminate self here, even though I'm the one who suggested it, but on the basis of that. Now, again, you could just say that those are just synonyms. You could just say that lo is nafsho and they're the same thing, but to me, it seems different. And also seems like mechita is worse than mokesh in many ways, because if mechita means destruction, that's like if you're snared,
like absolute
trapped,
destruction.
Right. Yeah.
And it's weird, like why start with the more severe one and then end up with the less severe one?
Right. Right. That's a good question. So I guess the question would be, what are the various ways in which words can bring destruction to a person, to themselves, and then in what way can they be a snare? And then the other thing which we have to keep in the back of our minds is the P versus Svasov question, which is there a difference between the, like, is that giving us a clue, or is it just using synonyms for speech?
Right. Yeah. Right. Well, I guess like when it says like the idea of snare, like I don't know, just this might not be what he's referring to, but kind of the way I'm thinking about it is like if you like get kind of like caught in a lie,
right?
Like, and you kind of keep getting deeper and deeper, and you can't get yourself out. But it's not like absolute like destruction. It's just like you're kind of like in this because of your words, you kind of boxed yourself into a corner.
Yeah. Okay. Good. So let's go with that then. The snare has something to do with trapping yourself based on your own words, not necessarily a lie, because we haven't seen evidence saying a lie, but that is a good example. Yeah. So now the question is, can we use that and get at what nafsho means as opposed to lo? Because if nafsho is specific, then yeah, I guess assuming nafsho is specific, then what might that mean?
Right.
Like how what would be the ensnarement, if that's a word, the ensnarement here.
And specific, you mean like it refers to what? Like,
well, let's say like body. If you said I don't know yet, but if you said see, I would assume it's not body, because lo would sound more like he's actually suffering. Mechita lo would seem like he's suffering like harm from without. That's just my intuition. So let's eliminate body here. Oops. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I have no idea.
So let's rely on our crutch here and plug in a definition of Axial. So we've had we had the Rביnu Yona's definition last time, and then we have our definition, which we've kind of seen from the psukim that we've done about Axial. So Rביnu Yona's definition was vague, right? Well, not vague; it was just very general. Is that he someone who's like addicted to bad actions, right? A certain lack of self-control. And then our definition was much more based on highlighted much more the egocentric nature of his actions, that he expects reality to conform to him, and he basically wants to And we saw from the other pasuk about speech that he wants to show himself off. And sorry, we saw from 18. Let's just go back really quickly on to the pasukim. So because we had 2 pasukim about a ksil so far in this chapter. So we have 18:2, which is lo yachbos ksil b'tvunas ki im b'hizgalos libo. There we saw that the ksil basically just wants to glorify himself and show off his knowledge. So that's one expression of ego, and therefore he's not going to be interested in listening to other people. And then we also saw from Sifsek Ksil Yavo Beriv that he's antagonistic, that he views all speech as like every conversation as like a competition, and he has to beat the other person, and therefore he's very insecure about the fact that they might say something that either undermines him or opposes him or like shows that he's wrong. So he's always on the attack.
Right. Right.
I think the first half can follow from that last pasuk, which is that we said that his mouth calls for blows, in the sense that because he walks into every conversation on the attack and views it as like a win-lose type scenario, so then that's going to be like a self-fulfilling prophecy where he causes other people to become defensive and offensive. So the last pasuk was just talking about the fact that the ksil speech elicits that reaction from them. I think what this pasuk might be talking about is that actually has real world consequences outside of just the exchange in the conversation itself. In other words, like if you're a ksil and you go around provoking everybody, so not only will they attack you in speech, but they can actually bring about destructive consequences to you in their actions, like by retaliating, by like, by tarnishing your reputation, by, mobilizing people against you. So that's what I would say is the most, and I'm taking that general approach because, like I said, mechita lo seems to be the most general thing possible. And if we're saying it's destruction, in other words, like in the last pasuk when it says l'mahalumos yikra, he calls for blows. Mahalumos are physical blows, and we said that that's like either that's. I mean, we didn't say that it was literal, but we said that it just means that he's going to put other people on the attack. But what's beyond that? Beyond that is actual harm, not just being attacked, but actual like destruction. And so I'm my mind from the last pasuk is inclined to say that this is talking about like the second tier consequences of the dynamics discussed in the previous pasuk. Like in other words, last pasuk was talking about in the conversation, he's going to provoke people to attack him verbally. And then this pasuk is saying, and outside of the conversation, there's going to be an effect on his actual like well-being.
Right.
Yeah.
It's gonna have further consequences.
Right.
Interesting.
So
and
now,
so that's only the first half, right?
I think that's the first half. Yes. Now the question is, does that shed light on the second half? Because now the second half we know is going to either the second half is going to be something that is an elaboration on an element of the first half, or the second half is going to be excluded by the first half. In other words, like first half is carving out a certain space where we can maybe have a clear idea of what the second half is saying.
Right. Also, I guess before we get there, like I guess that without interpretation, I guess with any interpretation really, but I guess the question is like who's the audience of this pasuk?
Yeah, right. We forgot to ask that.
It's usually not for the ksil, but
right.
It seems like I don't know if the consequence is that he's going to have destruction, then it seems like why should the non-ksil care about that?
Good question, right? So I'm going to elaborate. So who's the audience of this pasuk? It's not the ksil. It's not the ksil, since he won't listen to rebuke, as we learned last time, and as we learned from real life experience following the news. He won't listen to rebuke. But if it's the non-ksil, then why does he need to know about this? Yeah, so we did say last time that that the advice was for the non-ksil because you should know that this is going to be the dynamic you're going to get into if you engage the ksil in conversation. So the question, I guess, is can we say that the relevance of knowing that, like, I guess if this is an elaboration on that, then can this help you in the same way that that did, or not? You know, like on the surface, not, because you know, like the last time it was like, you know, if you talk to Axio, he's going to be antagonistic towards you, and that's going to result in a certain dynamic. This seems to be just talking about what's going to happen to him, so it doesn't seem as relevant to the non-Axio listener. Yeah, so it's a good question.
Right.
Yeah, so we'll set that aside though, because until we see the, I mean, look, there's two ways to do it, right? There's one way is to say we need to explain the pasuk in order to be able to answer that question. The other way is using that question to guide us in the interpretation of the pasuk. So
right.
So either way, my intuition is taking me the first way, saying that we really need to understand this in order to be able to say who it applies to. But the other way is also
for
possible.
For sure.
Yeah, so snare for his soul.
Right. And soul, like what thing are we referring to by soul? Is that like someone like him? No, we don't know. Okay.
Yeah, we don't know yet. That's definitely a possibility, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I have an intuition, but I could use a little bit more time to develop it, and then if we can't come up with anything, I'll share what I have, and then we'll go to the Mefarshim. And I think I think your first step that you took is going to be key here. Is that in what sense is it going to? In what sense is his speech going to trap him? Like, I guess two questions: why and in what sense? And then in the what sense, then we have to think about that in soul terms. Not knowing what soul is, but using that to guide us.
I mean, this is a slightly different path, but sure. Is it possible that I guess like he's going to like, I guess whatever he's saying, he's like I guess saying it often enough and like convincingly enough that he starts to like distort his own like sort of like perspective on things.
Okay,
and,
good.
Like affect his own.
So you're taking Nacho as mind, then, right? Yeah. Okay, good. I was taking a similar thing, right? So that's a good approach. So I think before we explore that, I think looking at the pasuk structurally, then the first half of the pasuk is talking about how his speech is going to bring bodily consequences upon himself from like externally. And then the second half is talking about how it's going to affect his mind internally.
Right. Okay.
And I think and the reason why I'm pointing that out is not that this is a raya, but it's always nice when you get a very neat symmetry in the pasuk, like right. Like it makes it sound like the or it like the question that we should always ask about, like, what's the subject of the pasuk? Then like when you have that symmetry and that's like mutually exclusive, that's a good, a good sign that like we hit upon the subject of the pasuk, And now we actually have some insight into the relationship between this pasuk and the previous one, because the previous one is really talking about how he engages other people in conversation, and this one is talking about the damaging effects of that on him.
Right. Yeah.
So let's see if we just elaborate a little bit more. So how exactly does that work? What I think your description was good, but like what would be an example of this type of snare for his mind?
Right. Like I guess he's like being sort of like as we said, like being antagonistic toward this guy, and then he starts like, I don't know, thinking that this guy is like, I don't know, the most evil guy or something like that, like the epitome of evil or something like that. I don't know. Yeah. And then starts thinking like
that's one possibility, is that we could take the quality of the antagonism, but I think there's a simpler and broader option, which is like this: is that if you're here's the question we didn't ask, by the way, which is actually let's use this question that we didn't ask, okay, which is, what is the opposite? Okay, so what would a chacham do? Okay, so what would you say about the why would a chacham not fall into this trap? And I think that could help us to clarify why the fool does fall into this trap. So we know why he's not going to fall into the first half of the pasuk, because he's not going around picking fights with his speech. But
Right.
why are his words not a snare for his mind?
Oh, because his mind precedes his words. Like he only speaks from his mind. He doesn't think from what he says.
Okay, good. So I think that points to now. Okay, so now you can explain how is the Kseal's speaking before he thinks going to be a snare?
Because he, I guess, right, because he doesn't think before he speaks, and then whatever he says, whatever comes out of his mouth, he kind of takes as true, and then he incorporates that into his mind.
One more point here, which is, so then why doesn't, okay, so theoretically it'd be possible for him to speak without thinking and then to not be ensnared by it. Like he could just say something wrong. So what is the quality that makes his wrong speech into an actual snare? Like let's say, if you want to use another muscle here, like he could trip, but tripping is different than being ensnared. So what quality of his speech makes him actually trapped by the stumbling block?
I don't know.
So here's what I think is, I think maybe this is following the same intuition you had when you talked about the antagonism, but it's just broader, which is that I think it's his ego again. Okay. In other words, if he just spoke without thinking, then he'll say the wrong thing. But if he is able to admit that he was wrong, then he wouldn't be ensnared by it, But instead what happens is he says something without thinking, and then he has to double down on it, because if he retracted, then that would be an indication of defeat in his mind, So he's saying stuff without thinking, and he's committing to it. And that's going to have that effect that we were talking about, that it actually is going to warp his mind, because let's say the chacham is using speech as a tool for gaining understanding. And when he is talking to someone, in a normal conversation, it's like an exchange between like expressing and refining what's in his mind, and then like using the speech to get more understanding. And then there's like a positive feedback loop between the understanding and like the speech, Speech is a tool for understanding for him. Okay. But the Kseal, when he's using speech as a weapon to destroy his opponents, and to show his own greatness, and to and to win. So then he can't back down, and therefore he's going to have to commit to whatever he says. And since he's speaking without thinking, then like his speech is going to end up shaping what his actual opinions are, because he's not because he can't make that move of retracting. You see what I'm saying?
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Interesting. So he's like, yeah.
No, go ahead.
No. Yeah. No.
I was just gonna say one more slight point here, and this is something that is I'm not getting this from the pasuk, but it's like a keep in the back of your pocket type of interpretation here. Is well, actually, let me ask you, what would you say, just in total isolation, what's the difference between mouth and lips, just as a mashal, without the nimshal? Like, what comes to mind as the key distinction there?
The mouth sort of formulates the words, and the lips say them.
Yeah. Okay, good. So the mouth is more connected, I think, I guess I don't know if this is what you're saying, Joe, but like in the process of speech, the mouth is more connected to the formulation part, whereas the lips are more connected to the expression part. Yeah. So where was I going to go with that? Oh, so does that help us? Is my question. Like, does that fit into this distinction that we're making here?
Right.
I mean, the second half definitely is like, in other words, if you take the lips as the most superficial expression of speaking, like it's like the most external part of the speaking process, or the one that's furthest removed from the mind, then it just underscores the idea that this, like when he just speaks whatever comes to his mind, that's the thing that ensnares him. It's like it's highlighting the the contrast. No, I don't know how to say it. Yeah, again, and maybe we don't even need to answer this question. I was just trying to see if it takes us there.
Yeah, right.
So let me attempt to summarize what we have so far, okay, and then we'll see if that answers our questions, and then we can look at some of the Mefarshim here. So, so this really is a sequel to the previous pasuk. So in the previous pasuk, we said, in fact, I'm going to cheat and look at the summary that I wrote of the previous pasuk. Yeah, so we said here in the previous pasuk, the Ksil expects reality to conform to his desires. When it doesn't, he takes it personally. For this reason, the Ksil will regard every conversation as a threat due to the potential inherent in every conversation that the other party's views will not conform to his own. Thus, he will enter into every conversation poised for a fight, both defensively and offensively, and he will knowingly and unknowingly make recourse to aggressive rhetorical tactics in an effort to ensure his victory in what would otherwise not even be a competition. As a consequence of his belligerence, he will awaken hostility in whoever converses with him, calling blows upon himself in the manner of a self-fulfilling prophecy. So that pasuk is really highlighting the impact of his speech on others. And then this pasuk is now expanding upon, this pasuk is answering the so what question, right? Like, yeah, the previous pasuk was saying the phenomenon, but why should this matter? So this should matter because, number one, it's going to bring him actual harm in real world consequences when they retaliate, either in the conversation itself or outside of the conversation. And then not only that, but he's also corrupting his own mind, because since he's leading with his ego and committing to whatever first comes to mind that he says, that is going to start to warp his thinking, because he's going to have to be committed to this.
Why should he care about that?
Why should he care about that? I think because of the same reason. Why should you care about reality in general? In a Mishlei perspective, right? Is that you're going to end up if you what's the good quote? Hold on. I mean, there's lots of good quotes about this, but I'm just one just came to mind. Hold on, what am I thinking of here? This isn't the one, but it is relevant to like that question in general. Is from Ayn Rand, that you can evade reality, but you can't evade the consequences of evading reality. In other words, he can in his mind, he can deny reality or ignore truth or like firmly maintain his position, but eventually the consequences will catch up to him.
Right.
Like let's say, for example, let's say you downplay the. Let's say you're in a conversation with someone, and you as a Ksil, and let's say the Ksil, downplays the risks of the coronavirus and of following CDC protocol. So a normal person might initially take that position and be mistaken, but if they can back down, then they'll be able to correct themselves and then like align themselves with the truth. But if you commit to it and you take this firm stance of it's all a hoax, or like the government is just trying to like take away our freedoms, and you end up thinking in that mentality, that's going to actually lead to you making decisions based on a false reality, which will bring further consequences.
I see. I see.
In some ways, even a worse way than the first half, because the first half is just saying that when he awakens other people's hostility, they will retaliate against him. But that's limited to like their priorities. Like the guy might drop it, or the guy might not have the resources to like actually harm him. But once you corrupt your own internal perspective, so then you are the one who's generating bad decisions based on your false perspective, and that follows you wherever you go. If you antagonize someone and then that person dies, so then you're kind of like free, but if you're corrupting your own mind, that's going to follow you for as long as you are stubbornly like embracing that view.
Right. So really, it does kind of seem on the surface that this is for the Ksil.
It does, yeah. I guess so then the question would be, then why do we need to hear it? So I think here the answer, Joe, you want to say the way you answered this question? It's a good answer.
I think I've answered this, that no person is any one exact title, right? Everybody has Ksil-like tendencies. So if you see yourself doing these things, you might realize, oh, I might be more of a Ksil than I thought.
Exactly, right. So in other words, the issue. Exactly. So while the pasuk is not for the full-fledged Ksil, it is for the potential Ksil, and we all are potential Ksil, and we all have that tendency in ourselves. And that's how the ksil became a ksil. Okay, is that he gave into these tendencies until it became second nature and until he couldn't control it anymore.
Got it.
Yeah.
Cool.
All right. So in the remaining time, let's look at some of the Mefarshim here. Okay. So I wanted to show you Rבינו Yona, first of all, who takes a completely different approach. So you can see on the screen here, right?
Yeah.
Okay, Rבינו Yona on the right. Okay, Piksil Mechita lo usfasa mokish nafsho. So Mechita mora umagur. So fear and trepidation. Okay, Miloshin. Oh, I guess this is not. Maybe there is no pasuk in Devarim. Maybe I was imagining that. Oh wait, no. Hold on. Isn't there a pasuk that says al tirav al techas?
Is like with Yoshua?
Yeah, is that in the end of Devarim?
Yeah.
You just read that like over the weekend.
We might have just read that. Yeah.
Or is it both?
Right. I think it's in Devarim somewhere. I don't know.
Anyway, we don't need to find it now, but so that's the word. That's how Rבינו Yona is taking what's the word in the pasuk? Mechita lo, right? So it's a fear for him. I'll techas mipneim. Don't be afraid before them. All right. Okay. So here's the idea. Ki aksil yiyare es piv kasher yiyare es oivav. Okay. The fool will fear his own mouth just like he fears his enemies. Ki ein piv bershuso, because his mouth is not in his control. He limed sfasav ledabir bli iyuna machshava. He's trained his lips to speak without like analysis or thought. Okay, a beautiful description there, right? Is he's habituated himself to speak without thinking, and therefore he's afraid of what he's going to say, right? And he can't control his tendency to speak. Al kain yikrenu hanesek v'hamichshol b'dvarav tamid. Therefore, harm and stumbling blocks will befall him on account of his words constantly. Kibahem gorim ra'a la'atzmo mitstadim ravim. They will cause him harm from many angles. Kibahem yicharcher riv imanashim. They will cause him to incite quarrel with other people. They will be a cause for tremendous harms. It'll cause him to reveal things which are which he should have concealed. And this will cause him to suffer harm and confusion and tremendous confusion in his matters and in his goals. Yeah. So I think this is actually very similar to the way we took it, except he's translating the word differently in terms of mechita. In other words, like I think in other words, like this. I think our whole pasuk, or our understanding of the whole pasuk, Rבינו Yona collapses into the second half of the pasuk, which actually works out very nicely due to the ambiguity of nafsho, because nafsho is his life. Nafsho is himself, nafsho is his mind. And you see that Rבינו Yona talks about all kinds of consequences, right? Antagonizing other people, bringing harm upon himself, bilbul, right? Confusion, which is like in his mind, And then he's saying the first half is bringing out a new idea, is that the fool himself is going to be afraid of what he's going to say, because he knows, and this shows a certain self-awareness on the part of the fool, which is that he has to know on some level that his mouth has gotten into trouble before, and yet he can't control himself because it's become second nature. Yeah. And again, like, I don't think we need to look very far to see really good examples of this, but like, let's say hypothetically, I mean, there are many examples of that. I'm just thinking of the example of Yigali Hadvarim Shu Roy Shiastirim. Like, let's say hypothetically, like, you mysteriously went to a hospital for a while and you had to keep it out of the public's eye while you went there. And then you just tweeted, I didn't have a series of mini strokes, when no one at all had actually like said that you had a series of mini strokes,
Right.
It's just, and when you have that, when you're, look, in the olden days, when a king spoke, how many people are his words going to reach before he could stop them? Like, if he speaks in the palace, he could really stop his speech from getting out, But when you have Twitter, and you just are just literally tweeting at whatever comes to your mind at any hour of the day, and it generates real world consequences, like there's got to be some level of self-awareness about the fear that what if I say something that like ends up being bad for me, you know,
Right.
at least one would hope.
Definitely. Right. That's
That's Rבינו Yona.
Cool. Cool. It's good.
Here's Rabag, who was I think similar to what we said if I remember correctly. Rabag, and then we'll end for today. Pixio, he says Divrei Axiel hem mevim chitas v'shever. So he's learning chitas as destruction because he's using it as a synonym for breaking. The words of Axiel will bring destruction and breaking. V'hem mokesh nafsho, and they will bring they will be a snare for his soul. Ki gorem ra la'atzmo mitstadim rabim. It will bring harm to him in many ways. Ki behem yichar. Oh, looks like Rבינו Yona. Wait, who came first? So I think Rabag came later. So I think Rabag is quoting Rבינו Yona, or maybe they're both quoting a common third source. Kibehem yicharche riv imanashim v'ze siba lo l'raos gedolos mehem kimitzad sichluso yachshov harbe pa'amim lomar mashu ozer lo b'hishafto es re'ehu. Okay, so he says because of, so the first part was the same as Rבינו Yona, but he says because of his foolishness, he will many times think to say something that will help him be shafto es re'ehu. I think here it does not mean when he judges his friend. I think it means when he's in a fight with his friend. V'yeh ha'inin b'hefech, and it'll turn out to be the opposite. Umihem ki hu yigale hadavar shi'eh roi shi'astir v'yeh ze siba labilbo riv binyana muvukashav. Yeah, so it looks like Rבינו Yona and Rabag were quoting similar things. Or yeah, I guess that's why I thought of both of them. Yeah, so I guess the only difference between them is that Rabag. Okay, actually, this is good. The only difference is Rabag did not say that chita meant fear. He said it meant breaking. But you see that they turn out to the same. They end up in the same place anyway. So I think I'm confident that this idea is correct. And like the only question is what the emphasis is on. According to Rבינו Yona, the emphasis is on his lack of self-control leading to these things. And according to the way we were interpreting it, this is really more relying on the idea presented in the previous pasuk about his antagonistic, ego-based form of combative form of speaking.
Right.
But the consequences are the same.
Cool. Wait, what was the first way?
Rבינו Yona or us?
Yeah, Rבינו Yona. Like
Rבינו Yona is saying that mechita is fear, and it's putting the emphasis on the fact that he can't control his tongue, and therefore he knows, like, therefore he's in a constant state of anxiety that he's going to say something that's going to end up harming him. No. So that, cool. I mean, that it does bring out an additional thing. Is not only does he generate, according to us, he's generating consequences for himself that he realizes and that he doesn't realize. According to Rבינו Yona, not only is he doing that, he's also in a perpetual state of anxiety that he's going to say the wrong thing and cause harm to himself.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right. It's funny because even though he has that, he still can't stop it.
Yeah, he still can't stop it. Exactly. Yeah, and I guess his only hope, even if he's a full-fledged fool, the only hope is what we learned last time, that according to Rבינו Yona, if he suffers a big enough bizui, like a degradation, and if he realizes that it's a consequence of his actions, then maybe he can change. But if someone tries to rebuke him, then he won't listen. You know, his ego won't let him listen.
Right.
Yeah. All right, let's stop for today, and we'll try to get into the habit of starting each new day reviewing what we did before. So if I forget tomorrow, then remind me. We'll just do a quick review. Okay.
All right.
All right.
Cool. Thanks.
Okay, bye.
Thanks so much.